Yeah, I'd like to see that one.
We are going to get started now. Thank you for coming, everyone. And those of you in Zoom land, hello. My name is Kitch Rinehart. Kitch is a nickname for Catherine in my family. And my husband and I are the creators and the chairman of the Vicksburg Quilt Trail. Now, my husband is usually right here, but he's not today because he and our son are flying to Washington, D.C. to see all the war memorials on one of those honor flights. So it's a very patriotic day for my family. Anyway, how we got into this, some a little background about us. We've been married for 52 years. And I was an art major and an art teacher in Cincinnati. And I'm not a great artist, but I've been quilting since 92, and I'm not a great quilter. But what I am is I'm really, really organized. So if you're starting a quilt trail or interested in getting your arts council or your quilt group starting a quilt trail in your county, that's the kind of person you have to find. You have to find someone who's really organized. Because for a year and a half, we had 4 balls in the air. We had this person signing the contract. We had this person picking out their quilt pattern. We had this person who was picking their colors out. And then we had this 4th person in my garage painting the quilt. So really, really organized. Now, to give you some background on where quilt trails began, it all started with one person painting one quilt on their family barn to honor their mother, who was a quilter. The young lady's name was Donna Sue Groves, and this all happened in 2001 down in Athens County, Ohio. Go Bucks, that's right. And this is the Ohio Star, and originally it was painted in scarlet and gray. Now, originally, see, these are old tobacco barns in Athens County, right along the Ohio River. And they painted them right on the barn boards. Well, that didn't turn out so well. It is peeled and it's gotten quite sad looking. But the very first quilt was a snail trail. I can show you the snail trail. The snail trail quilt was done in purple and green by Donna Sue on her mother's barn. And to this day, a lot of quilt trails still pay homage to that by putting a snail trail on their quilt trail. So we lived in Cincinnati. That Athens County was just a couple counties over, and I went with my girlfriends to visit it. Took lots of pictures, moved to Michigan to be near grandchildren, and a few years later, my neighbor puts this on her barn. I said, oh yeah, we've got some beautiful barns around here. This would be a great idea. We were retired, and it was time to give back. So I approached my husband, and he said, well, let's just develop some goals. And our goals were, we wanted to create a project that would involve the entire community as best we could. We wanted to create a project that would bring tourists to Vicksburg and also maybe send them out into the countryside. That whole theme is called agritourism. You go out, you buy some eggs, you buy some honey, maybe you go to a little farm stand, and agritourism was born then in the early 2000s. Another thing we wanted to do was we wanted to encourage the farmers to preserve their barns, because we had seen many barns just collapse and rot around us. And by doing something like this, they're going to preserve it, they're going to enhance it. So we pitched this idea in 2012 to the Vicksburg Historical Society. The Vicksburg Historical Society runs the Vicksburg Historic Village. It's like a little mini Greenfield village right here in Vicksburg, and we have an old farmhouse. There's a wonderful depot museum. The trains go shooting past. These, all these buildings are open every Saturday or Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from 1 until 5 o'clock if you want to come and visit. They're just chock full of artifacts dating from 1870 to about 1930. It has a one-room schoolhouse. It has a garage and a blacksmith shop, among many, many other buildings. So the Vicksburg Historical Society said, that sounds like a great idea, but we'll think about it for a couple of weeks and then we'll vote on it. Well, in that couple of weeks, Hugh and I did two different things. First, we called all 4 townships that the school district straddles. It's a very large school district, like 110 square miles. So we called all 4 school townships to see the legalities of putting something on a barn. And all the zoning people told us it's perfectly fine. There's no words, there's no advertising. It's just like putting a big metal sign on a star on the side of that barn. So the second thing we did was we went up north and we visited the 3 quilt trails that were in existence in Michigan at that time. Vicksburg is the 4th quilt trail, and now there's 33 and counting. So we visited first Osceola Quilt Trail, and Osceola was a little different. They have, at that time, they had 100 quilts, and that was a lot. And the barn owner had to pay $200 for the smaller size and $400 for the larger size, and he had to hang it himself. Well, that didn't sit well with us. So next we went to Alcona County, over there by Harrisville and Lake Huron. And we liked what they had done. They had put 2 quilts in each township, plus 1 in each city. And I think they had 28 at the time. It was all done by donations, all done by volunteers, and they had real control over what the design was that way. So we came home, and the Vicksburg Historical Society said, we really like the idea. We're going to make it our first outreach project, and you guys will be the chairman. So here we are. We're the chairman. And that gave us the 501c3 status so that we could write a grant. Now, to digress a little bit, we now get together as the Vicksburg, or the Quilt Trails of Michigan. We get together every couple of years up mid-state somewhere, and we encourage new trails to begin. That's why there's 33 and counting. And we also have show and tell. If you're a quilter, you know that show and tell is very important. So we enjoy seeing everybody's show and tells and encouraging the new quilt trails. But most importantly, we get together, and for very few pennies, we all donate and put together what we call a rack card for all of the welcome stations in Cincinnati. The Welcome Center, if you walk into any Welcome Center, did I say Cincinnati? The Welcome Centers of Michigan. And so if you walk into one, you can always find the quilt trails, the card that I gave you, and you'll find the information as you're traveling. There's the counties, and on the back is the contact information and how to get hold of what you're passing. So those are at all of the Michigan Welcome Centers. And it is fun to chat with the other quilters, and we share a lot of information about what kind of paint did you use, what kind of cord did you use, and such as that. And I'm going to share all that information with you. If you're taking notes today and want to actually paint something, be sure and pull out a pen and paper, because I am going to explain how to paint your own. So that gave us, now we're coming back and we have our 501c3 status, and we can write a grant to the Vicksburg Foundation. I'd never written a grant before, and I hope I never have to write one again. And we had to illustrate it because nobody knew what a barn quilt was or what a quilt barn was. So we illustrated it, and they said they would love to give us our $2,900, which was ample because we only used $1,900 of it to put 24 barn quilts around this region. And when they gave us the check, they said, it sounds like a lot of bang for very little bucks. And it turned out to be so, with $1,000 left over. Now we had to get busy and we had to find the barns. So my husband's on a motorcycle, his two buddies are on their motorcycles, I'm in my car, the two wives are in their cars, the six of us scoured, I mean, every back road of the Vicksburg School District. And we got together, we took pictures, and we discussed, and we scratched out, and we called, and we invited. Sometimes they said no to us because of privacy issues. They didn't want people peering in their land. And sometimes we had to say no to others because maybe they were on a gravel road or their barn was set way too far back from the street. So once we have found a suitable barn or historical building, we approach them and they sign a site agreement. This gives us permission to use their address and photos, and it gives them, you know, the rights to keep up their barn. They have to keep up the barn if anything happens to it, and we have to keep up the quilt if anything happens to it, like if lightning strikes it or if a tree falls in it or something like that. So far, none of those things have happened. But this is a 5-year agreement. Now we're entering almost our 11th year, so we've got to get agreements signed again next summer in 22. After they sign the agreement, they have to pick out the pattern. So I gave them all my quilt books. I came to this library, I got all kinds of quilt books, and I gave them all these quilt books. They had to find something very meaningful because they're going to be looking at it for 5, 10, now 15 years. They had to find something that could be bright and colorful. And oftentimes they went into a closet and they found an old quilt that great-grandmother or someone had made, and they wanted to honor someone. So those were, a lot of those were reasons why they would pick a particular pattern. In the meantime, there's a gal named Sue Perrin. She's an English teacher down in Georgia. She became fascinated with this whole subject. She wrote a book in 2012, and it is this one called Barn Quilts and the American Quilt Trail Movement. In it, she has a chapter about the 3 quilt trails that were up north. So I will pass this around. Here, the blue tab is the Michigan chapter. She did that, and it was published and came out in 2012. She and I became friends that year. She stays at our house. She and her husband and her dog stay at our house. She's fascinated with Vicksburg and how we're developing this and how it's such a compact trail because it's just a school district. You don't have to drive all over the entire county to see all the quilts. So she writes another book. It comes out in 2016, and it's called Following the Barn Quilt Trail. And in it, look at here, she writes an entire chapter about Vicksburg and staying at my house with her dog. So Susie Perrin brought real fame to our little town. And these books are available upstairs. I think they're also in the Schoolcraft Library as well. Some of the criteria that we had for choosing these barns and historical buildings was it had to be very visible. It had to be facing the front of the road, not to either side, coming and going. You had to see it. It had to be on a paved road because motorcycles and cyclists don't like gravel. Cars don't like gravel. So it had to be on a paved road, or it had to be in a situation where you could turn around and stay on the paved road. It had to be fairly close to the road so that people could have a safe pull off, take a picture, pull back in, and resume their trail. And it also kind of had to fit into a self-guided loop around the school district. There might be a couple U-turns. You turn in a driveway or something like that, but it had to be a self-guided loop. So those are some of the reasons that we had to turn people down or people didn't want to participate. The paints that we used were these little $4 Behr paints. Our product comes from Home Depot. This is interior, exterior paint. Exterior meaning it's got the stretchy stuff in it, so it'll survive the winter. And we put 2 coats of primer on, and then 2 coats of this. But they were selecting their color out of all these hundreds of shades. Here's the Kills, here's the primer that we used. It was Kills 2, and it's latex primer from Home Depot. We put 2 coats of that on at least, and particularly around the edge. For those out there in Zoom land, I hope you're, yes, I see someone that's making notes, that's good. 2 coats of primer and 2 coats of color. Now, if you've got red, that fades fast. If you've got yellow, that fades fast. So go over that with maybe 3 coats or 4 coats. As you can see, we rolled on the primer with a roller. That roller lived in my refrigerator for 1.5 years. I finally threw it away. But also, we kept the sponge brushes in saran wrap in my refrigerator. It took a week to paint one. It took 1.5 years to complete all 24. Oh, this is Murphy, kids. This is our kitty cat. He'd like to watch us. One time he even got on the paint, put his paws all the way through the paint. Oh, were we mad at him? So to keep the board from warping, my husband built a framework behind it. He's making this one as a 2x2 frame, a 4x4 framework, and he's making it out of 2x2. Paint the frame to match the edge of the quilt. And he's drilling as few holes as possible into the old brick, as well as your metal barn or your barn wood. You don't want to punch a bunch of holes in it. So after he does that, that's his frame for the small one. Like I said, he was my carpenter. Product all came from Home Depot again. Now look, kids, there's Murphy again. And this is half of a frame of an 8x8. And again, he's using, I think, 2x3s or 2x4s. And they get bolted together once they're up on the barn. You'll see how that construction goes in a little bit. When these are completed, this weighs 160 pounds with the frame with pictures on it. And the smaller one weighs 30 pounds. Now, back in 2012, I mean, wood prices are way different now, but back in 2012, a smaller would cost $30 to make, and a larger would cost $100 to make. Now, here are the boards. Your board is a 1/2-inch plywood. You're buying at Home Depot again. Do not buy pressure-treated wood because it takes forever to dry, and the priming just doesn't work. So you buy plain, dry, 1/2-inch plywood. These are 4 sets of sawhorses in my garage. You'll come and you'll paint. Here we are painting bluebirds. And you're ruling it out with pencil. Don't use a Sharpie. Rule it out with pencil and a metal yardstick. You make a grid work on your barn quilt, and then you just erase the things that don't go into your pattern. And at this point now, we had everybody come to our house and paint. We had the neighborhood children come and paint. Honestly, when we had children paint, we used painter's tape. But normally we did not use painter's tape because, you know, it's 50 feet away and 50 feet in the air. Nobody knows whether that line is perfectly straight or not. We also had the barn owners come and paint. Young, old. We tried to engage the community every way we could. This was being painted at the famous Vicksburg Car Festival. We also painted at farmers market. We painted anywhere we could gather a group of Vicksburg people to include the community. Okay, for those of you out in Zoom land who are taking notes, this is how you paint your points. You cut it in with a teeny tiny paintbrush, the smallest paintbrush you can find. Cut in your points. Then you choke up on your sponge brush and you just drag it right down your line. Then you simply fill it in like a coloring book. So this is the way that the village got behind us. They loaned us the Department of Public Works, the DPWs, These guys actually enjoyed doing this because it was a little different than the usual tasks. And it would take them an hour once they arrived on the lot to hang one of these barn quilts for us. The two pieces went together, and then they would screw in many, many screws to keep from warping all around the edge. So just a few holes on the barn and lots of holes around the frame. And this is my husband, Hugh. He's inside receiving the 8-inch bolts. And there, you can barely see it's received into a little chunk of 2x4. So that's an 8-inch bolt. Now, welcome to Vicksburg. It's called the Village with a Vision. It's very cute. It has 2 stoplights. And we have a nice coffee house where you can get a nice frou-frou coffee. We have craft beer. And we have delicious ice cream. All you kids have been to Apple Knockers. I know that. And there's the little ship out back on Sunset Lake that you can play on. This is a Apple Knockers ice cream shop. Yay. Okay, we've got our coffee or our ice cream cone. We are ready to take the tour. It's about a 45-mile length tour loop, and takes about a couple hours, maybe a little longer if you stop and take some good photos. This one is called Wreath of Lilies. You can follow along in your red map. Wreath of Lilies was chosen by the family because they wanted to bring attention to the famous I'm drawing it up, American lotus water lily. And that looks like this here. This is a pod from the American lotus water lily. Years ago on Sunset Lake, people used to come and get off the train in their bustles and such. And in August, these American lotus water lilies made these great big blooms. They say they were the size of a saucer. And they had this seed pod in them. Each one of these little holes had a little seed in it. And the children of the area used to collect these seed pods and sell them for a quarter. And people would make dried arrangements out of them back in the 20s. Well, guess what? There weren't any seeds. So all the plants died, and they can't get them back again. They've tried to replant them, but they can't. So that whole, all these water lilies on Sunset Lake are gone. The next one on the trail is called Water Wheel, because right down the street, Mr. Vicker built a water mill, right? Or I mean, a mill for grains right on the creek. And that's where Vicksburg got its name, from Mr. Vickers. Also at this building is the old jail. At one time, it had all the offices, the Vicksburg city offices, and it had a jail there. And there's a new owner here, but I assume she still allows people to go into the jail and look at the old bunks. There's even a little toilet in there. It's quite fun to look at the old jail right up on the street here in Vicksburg. Then the next one on the trail is called Fanny's Fan. And this is Fanny Bear, built this library back in 1902. And she was a widow, and that's what she did with her money. She built this library. And this is the original entrance on the street south of us. So we wanted to paint it like in 1902 color swatches. You get on the internet, and there you have colors of 1902, were popular in 1902. Now, it's not the most vibrant and brightest on the trail, but it's just perfect and fitting, and it goes beautifully with the building. Fanny's Fan. This one is called Pure Michigan Maple, because the couple loves to make maple syrup in the spring. She painted it herself. They hung it themselves, but I'm not sure that they used the correct paint because it's fading quite badly right now, and I might talk to her about what we can do about this. Depot Museum has railroad crossing. It's just the perfect choice for a depot museum. And it's done in colors that kind of go along with the building. The barn that's in the depot museum wouldn't be acceptable because the whole museum is full of items that end in 1930s. And this is a phenomenon that started this century. So that wouldn't work. And I repeat that the Depot Museum and all of the buildings in it are open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from 1 until 5 if you want to go through and see everything. On Friday, it's fun to go to the farmer's market and get your corn and your tomatoes. This is called the Pavilion Center, and it's just a beautiful community center. All kinds of events are held here. It was built by timber framers, and there's not one nail in it. It's all held together with these pegs.
Yeah.
Across the street from the pavilion is a flower quilt flower. And the lady that owns Prudential Nursery plants it in a bow tie pattern or something like that, using marigolds or begonias, something like that. Continuing on the trail, we have baskets. This family is a quilter, and they designed this and they painted it themselves. At Easter time, she puts little Easter eggs in there and hangs bunnies beside it. It's very cute. And I might add that baskets is reputed to be a signal quilt. Now, this is a great project if you folks have kids or grandchildren who need a Civil War project or a Civil War research project. Signal quilts were quilts that were sewn and made by the slaves down south, and they would signal them different things. The slaves down south would hang these quilts on fences or clotheslines, and maybe it was a North Star pattern. That meant follow the North Star. Maybe they saw baskets. That meant gather your belongings. We're leaving very soon. We're going to try and escape very soon. Another one was the bear claw. Follow the animal trail. Another one was the bow tie pattern. That meant dress up a little better. There are people in this area looking for you. So signal quilts is a wonderful subject. If you know anybody studying Civil War, there's tons of children's books and grown-up books about the subject. And I'll show you another signal quilt coming up too. This one is called Love the Land. This family just loves the area. They've been Vicksburgers forever. And originally, the pine trees were German flags, 2 little German flags. And I said, Freddie, your husband is a World War II veteran. I don't think he wants German flags hanging on his barn. She said, you're right. So she chose the Dutch, her ancestors are Dutch loggers. So she chose pine trees instead. And she came to the garage, my garage, and helped paint it. So love the land. You can see all the screw holes around each single panel. Some people put borders on them. Some chose not to have borders on them. It's just a preference. The next one is the inspiration for the entire Vicksburg Quilt Trail. These are the Evansons, and they have their barn in a national calendar.
What's the name?
That national calendar that looks like this. You can order this national calendar from that website on the back of your map called barnquiltinfo.com. Every year, this national calendar is put out. If you're a Quilt Trail fan, it's really a fun gift or a fun thing to have.
That's just out here. What piece of town?
So this is North Star, and again, this is a signal quilt.
Yeah.
This signals the slaves to follow the North Star. That's the way you're supposed to go.
That's the one I prefer right now.
Here it is at Christmas time. They always light up a cross.
So
This one is called Back to School. The family chose it because across the street there used to be a one-room schoolhouse. Across the street was called Three Corners, and the schoolhouse was called Morse School. And the caretaker for the schoolhouse lived in this house at this farm. So they wanted to be on the quilt trail, and they had to restore their barn, quite honestly. They told me that they spent $10,000 to have the Amish come in and rebuild the barns. They knocked down the silo that was over on the right, and they rebuilt the barn on metal. Had they chosen wood, it would have cost them about $30,000. And then you get tourists. This agritourism is quite fun. We got these Model Ts touring around one year. You'll see old tractors touring around. Certainly lots of motorcycle trips and things like that go around. This is back to school. Fall colors, little schoolhouse. The schoolhouse is a classic if you're a quilter. And the next stop on the trail is called Bright Morning Star. And this is a tour of old antique tractors that pose in front of it. Bright Morning Star refers to the New Testament where Jesus said, "I am your bright morning star." And the whole family are graduates of Vicksburg school system. So they definitely wanted to have the bulldogs red and white represented. This was different because it's on posts instead of being hung on the wall of the barn. The posts had to be, let's see, that was 8. The post had to be 14 feet long because you've got 8 foot of quilt. Then you've got about 3 or 4 feet of blank area where the snow builds up. And then you've got 3 feet in cement. And when we did these, like the one that's in front of the library, again, the Department of Public Works drilled the holes for us. Now this one is a 4-footer. So it was 10 feet poles, 10-foot poles, 3 feet of cement, 3 foot above the ground, 4 foot of the barn quilt. Here's Susie Karen on one of her first visits. She's got her book, and she's in front of Bright Morning Star. This is as far east as you can get on the trail. This is Centennial. Now this family has been running this farm for almost 150 years. They plant begonias, they plant sunflowers. They've really decorated the Centennial area very, very beautifully. It's a beautiful spot. This one is called, this is out in Fulton now, we're out in Fulton. This one is called County Fair. They chose this because the kids won lots of prizes at the county fair with their 4-H program. Now this barn is humongous. They say that it took 20 acres of elm trees to build it. It used to be called Elm Acres. And there's a full basketball court inside. And local teams used to play full court basketball. Here it is going up, and you'll see it's kind of slathered with that caulk. Now don't be alarmed, the caulk turns clear. It's 30-year caulk, it goes on white, but it turns clear. And this is we seal all the edges where we think the water might get in or the snow might lay. Seal the holes on the screw holes. Wherever there's an opportunity, we try to seal out the water. And here it is in the winter. You can see the snow falling down. It's a great shot. They put it on point. It looks bigger when it's on point. And it's unique when it's on point. This is right down the street. It's called Patriotic Star. The design just spoke to this family. And in my family, there's a lot of this going on today. This one is called Starlight. This is supposed to be the tallest barn in the whole county. And it's what they call a bank barn, where the horse could drag the wagon right up the bank, pull in, and then they could unload the wagon right there. Starlight goes back to the American nursery rhyme. A lot of nursery rhymes were English, but the American nursery rhyme called Starlight, Star Bright, first star I've seen tonight. And they like stars, they like blue, and it was an easy pick for that family. This one is called God's Eye, and it's a very spiritual family, and they wanted to have a quilt that had the word God in it. And God's Eye has an interesting backstory. This quilt pattern used to be sewn in a lot of pioneer quilts. Women who are heading west with their families, covered wagons and all, they would sew this quilt because perhaps one of their family members wasn't going to make it. So they would use this quilt, they would wrap the body in this quilt, bury it as best they could, you know, in those hard or harsh and snowy circumstances, hoping that God would keep an eye on that body. So interesting backstory. And then we had those antique farmers pose in front of it as well. Hunter's Star is kind of painted with Indian colors, Indian shades. And these folks run a hunting business. You can go out there and hunt deer and hunt pheasant. And so it was just a perfect choice. Can't quite see it, but there's an interesting lightning rod up on top with glass balls on it. It was common back in the day, but most of those glass balls got shot off by BB guns or 22s. So it's preserved out there. It's really unusual. This one is called Bluebirds. This is the one that was being painted in my basement, or I'm sorry, in my garage. And Bluebirds refers to the many, many birdhouses that they have all over the property. And it's just full of bluebirds all spring long. The house that's attached to this is beautiful. And the Amish came out one time and had to restore some of the spindles and some of the gingerbread that was on the outside of the house. And they told me that when the Amish were on site that week doing their work, all they wanted to do in the evening was watch television. This lady painted her own. She grabbed her grandmother's quilt and replicated it. And here it is on those 10-foot posts, 3 feet underneath, 3 feet above, 4 feet of quilt. And this quilt is called Drunkard's Path. Kind of another interesting backstory. Back in the late 1800s, there was the temperance movement where the women were trying to get everybody to stop drinking. And so they would make these quilts and they would sew them, or they would sell them. And with the money, then they bought and produced more brochures to pass out. They felt that if you even slept under this, you would start drinking. Then we wanted to get the kids involved, of course. Here are the middle schoolers. They are painting Arrowhead. And Arrowhead is painted with the colors of the Indian spiritual elements of air and earth and fire and water. You can see those 4 colors easily. And they all sign their name around the border. There again, they're not using painter's tape, they're just freehanding it. And that's just fine, because it turned out beautiful. Arrowheads was chosen by this family because when they would plow in the spring, they would find lots of arrowheads. It's very near the Portage River, and so they figured it was at one time an Indian hunting ground. So we got the high schoolers involved. And this is their big aha moment when they push their 4 pieces together. They also painted their names around the border, and there were lots of foreign exchange students that name. So there are some really interesting countries represented. They had the task of making the paints look like fabric. They tried to make it, look like real fabric with checks and circles and things like that. It's called Broken Star, and the brother and sister had just lost their father, and so they felt that their family was a little broken, so they chose the name Broken Star. A lot of us who quilt know that another name for this pattern is Carpenter's Wheel. Jesus wheel, carpenter's wheel. You can find many names for practically every quilt pattern. They change names a lot over the decades.
But it's in blue.
Here it is in a winter scene. This one is about as far south as you can go. This is called Around the Corner because it's a very windy road. Kayakers come and cross the bridge, go under the bridge, sometimes pause here. And Around the Corner was chosen by this family, and they chose their paint colors kind of the way I choose mine. They went by the name. They got Lemon Sorbet and Summer Heat and Corn Silk and pretty summery colors. Here it is being installed. And it also made that national calendar. This one is called Corn and Beans. It represents the, the changing of the corn and the beans from year to year to keep the soil fertile. They change it. And so the little exact triangles and exact tidy rows, that represents the corn and the beans. You can see the color of both in there. And here it is with huge farm equipment. This family farms over 3,000 acres in the area, and it's family run. This was a surprise. This is down on Mint Road, and the lady was at a quilt meeting one time, and when she got home, her family surprised her for her birthday and had painted and hung Lori's star. Again, very patriotic colors. Now we were looking for one last barn. We wanted to have a big send-off, something different. So we wanted to have a barn that had more than one quilt block on it. So we found this barn. It's over on Portage, still barely within the school district, but it is, and it's about as far west as you can get. It's a mess. We've got mold, we've got ivy, we've got bushes and pine trees. And he said, clean it up. I said, okay, we'll give you 2 weeks. So in the meantime, there's a big quilt group that meets here in the library, right here in this room, and they made friendship stars. There's a group that meets over the Methodist Church. They did twisted log cabin. This is a parabola. When I was an art teacher, we used to do parabolas, and they're fun to draw, but boy, are they a pain to paint. This one is a smaller quilting group here in the area, and they meet at various people's homes, and they painted Michigan Star in kind of fall colors. Now we needed one more group, and we didn't have it. So I looked around at my 3 girlfriends, and we all get together every winter and we sew quilts for charity. And I said, let's do one. So we made a 4th one. Here we are in my garage painting, and we're painting a double wedding ring. And here's the finished job. We've all been married forever, so we put our names and our wedding dates on there, double wedding ring. And now you saw the before of that. This is 2 weeks later. Here's what it looks like. Beautiful, big difference. It still looks that good. And then the wife planted some daylilies along the bottom. It's really dynamic. And, to my knowledge, it's the only quilt gallery in the state. Now, after we got done with our 24 barns and the tour and it was finished, suddenly bonus quilts start popping up. And you get itty bitty ones. And you get small ones. You can buy things like this down at Shipshewana. You get medium-sized ones. This one's called Mariner's Compass. Again, Shipshewana. This one is called Farmer's Daughter.
That must be the 8 by 8.
Yeah.
It's a big one. It's an 8 foot by 8 foot. It's heavy. And then in order to pay back and make some money for the Historical Society, Hugh and I would, right in this room, we would have quilt workshops. And they painted 2x2s, about like this. We spent an afternoon. In fact, there's some green paint over here. I should get with Resolve, I think. Everybody had a blast. We made a lot of money for the Historical Society. We did 6 of these, 20 people each. And this is some of the finished ones, one time. We also painted some and sold them at the Depot Museum, has a retail area. So we painted some extras and sold them there. Maple leaf. And then, if you don't want to paint it yourself, you and I take consignments. $200, we'll paint one for you. This is one that we did for a family over in Gobles. And this was one we did for a family right here in Vicksburg. We also give these presentations. We charge very little. Historical societies have had us out, quilt trails, art guilds, things like that. We've gone all over the lower area of Michigan. And that is the end of the Vicksburg Quilt Trail. Does anybody have any questions? Do any of you Zoom folks have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
The one that's just outside here on the left, I think is a North Star. What is that? How big is that? Is that 4x4?
Here in town, the ones.
No, it's just outside of town on the left side.
North Star is an 8x8. They painted North Star themselves and put it facing their home. That was the one that was the inspiration for the quilt trail. That's my neighbor. And they painted it on galvanized metal with enamel paint.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, I said, why? And they said, because it'll never peel.
Yeah. And how big is that one?
That's an 8 foot by 8 foot.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's really big. Really heavy too. So if there are no more questions, I hope you have a wonderful time in Vicksburg and a good time on the trail. Thank you so much for coming. Bye, Zoomers.
What are we gonna do?